The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Patterson Industries, casting long shadows across the polished marble floors. Marcus Williams stood in the executive elevator, his weathered hands gripping a maintenance toolkit that had seen 30 years of loyal service. At 58, his hair had turned a distinguished silver, and the lines around his eyes told stories of both struggle and perseverance. The elevator doors opened to the top floor, where he'd been summoned for what he assumed was another repair job. But as he stepped out, he found himself face to face with Richard Patterson, the CEO himself. The younger man, perhaps in his early 40s, stood there in his tailored suit, his expression unreadable. "Still upset with me?" Richard asked quietly. Marcus paused, his jaw tightening. The question hung in the air between them like morning fog. 3 weeks had passed since their confrontation, since Marcus had spoken words he never imagined he'd say to the man who signed his paychecks. "Mr. Patterson," Marcus began, his voice measured and calm, "I said what needed saying." Richard gestured toward his office. "Please, just 5 minutes of your time." Marcus hesitated. Every instinct told him to decline, to maintain the professional distance that had kept him employed and stable for 3 decades. But something in Richard's voice, a vulnerability he hadn't heard before, made him nod. They entered the vast corner office, and Richard closed the door behind them. The city sprawled below them through floor-to-ceiling windows, indifferent to the human dramas playing out in its towers. "I've been thinking about what you said," Richard began, settling into a chair rather than behind his imposing desk. "About how I treat people." Marcus remained standing, his toolkit resting at his feet. "Sir, I probably overstepped." "You didn't," Richard interrupted. "You were the first person in years to tell me the truth." The memory of that day flooded back. Marcus had been fixing a leak in the executive washroom when Richard had berated a young intern to tears over a minor scheduling error. Something in Marcus had snapped. Perhaps it was watching his own daughter struggle through internships, facing similar treatment. Perhaps it was 3 decades of swallowed words finally demanding release. He'd stepped out of the washroom and spoken firmly. "That young woman is somebody's child. She made a mistake, but she doesn't deserve to be torn down like that. None of us do." The silence that followed had been deafening. Richard had stared at him, face flushed with anger and surprise. Marcus had walked away, certain he'd just ended his career, wondering how he'd explain to his teenage son that they might lose their home. But the termination never came. Instead, this summons, and now this conversation. "My father built this company," Richard said, looking out at the city. "He was hard, unforgiving. I watched him reduce grown men to nothing with his words. I swore I'd never be like him, but somewhere along the way, I became exactly that." Marcus listened, sensing the weight behind the words. "I have a daughter," Richard continued, his voice softer now. "She's 7. Last week, she drew a picture of me at school. The teacher sent it home with a note." He pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, unfolding it carefully. It showed a stick figure man with a frown, surrounded by other frowning figures. "The assignment was to draw your hero at work. She told her teacher she wasn't sure I was a hero anymore because I seemed angry all the time." The confession settled between them. Marcus thought of his own children, of the man he'd worked so hard to be for them after their mother passed 5 years ago. A man who showed them that strength could be gentle, that power should be kind. "Mr. Patterson," Marcus said, his voice carrying the warmth of hard-earned wisdom, "being a good father and being a good leader, they're not so different. Both require us to lift people up, not tear them down. My late wife used to say that people don't remember what you said or what you did. They remember how you made them feel." Richard's eyes glistened. "How do you do it? Raise your kids alone, work these long hours, and still manage to be so steady, so kind?" Marcus smiled, a gentle expression that reached his eyes. "I'm not perfect. There are days I fail, days I'm too tired or too worried about bills to be the father I want to be. But I try to remember that my children are watching. They're learning how to treat people by watching how I treat people. That keeps me honest." "The intern," Richard said. "Jennifer. I sent her flowers and an apology, but she requested a transfer to a different department. I don't blame her. That's on you to carry," Marcus replied, not unkindly. "But what matters is what you do next. Not just with her, but with everyone. Change isn't a single apology. It's showing up differently every single day." Richard stood, extending his hand. "I want to do better. Will you help me?" Marcus studied the younger man's face, seeing genuine remorse and determination. He thought about his own journey, the mistakes he'd made and the grace others had shown him. "I'm a maintenance worker, Mr. Patterson. I fix what's broken in buildings." "Maybe," Richard said, his handshake firm and humble, "that's exactly the perspective I need. Someone who knows how to repair foundations." Over the following months, something shifted in Patterson Industries. Richard began walking the floors, learning names, asking about families. When mistakes happened, he coached instead of condemned. The change wasn't perfect or immediate, but it was real. Marcus watched it unfold with quiet pride, never seeking credit, content to have planted a seed that was taking root. One evening, as Marcus prepared to leave for the day, Richard caught up with him in the lobby. "I wanted you to know," Richard said, "my daughter drew a new picture yesterday. This time, I'm smiling. And I'm holding her hand." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's beautiful, Mr. Patterson." "Richard," the CEO corrected gently. "Please, call me Richard." "And Marcus, thank you. For your courage that day, and your patience since. You reminded me who I wanted to be." As Marcus walked to his car, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of amber and gold. He thought about the unexpected ways life teaches us, how sometimes the smallest acts of courage create the biggest ripples. He pulled out his phone and texted his son, "Be home soon. Love you." The response came quickly. "Love you too, Dad." In that moment, Marcus understood something profound. We all have the power to change someone's trajectory with simple honesty spoken in kindness. Sometimes being upset enough to speak truth, and brave enough to speak it with grace, is the greatest gift we can give. Because real strength isn't found in breaking others down. It's found in building them up, one honest conversation at a time.